So friends, welcome back. In this session, we will quickly understand the AI or to be very concise, the GenAI workflow. What are all the stages that are involved in the GenAI workflow is to be discussed in this session, and I'll spend little bit of time on each of the stages and it's going to be very interesting. It eventually starts with planning and requirements gathering, and then it goes on to data preparation. Then we navigate to model development, and comes the deployment and integration. Maintenance and update follows next, followed by compliance and ethics. And finally, last but not the least, it ends with documentation and knowledge sharing. Each stage is very crucial and it carries its own importance. We will start with planning and requirements gathering. The first and the foremost stage that we need to look into is planning and requirements gathering. It has got four important components within it. We start with defining the objectives. We have to clearly outline the goals and the desired outcomes of the GenAI project. We have to establish a very clear and measurable goals for what the GenAI project aims to achieve. And most importantly, we have to identify the business problems or the opportunities that the project is going to address. We have to align the project objectives with overall business strategy and priorities, and we should also set realistic timelines and milestones for the project completion. And we should understand what are the KPIs, key performance indicators to measure success. Next is identification of the use cases. We need to determine specific use cases where GenAI can really provide value. We need to conduct a brainstorming session to identify potential AI and GenAI applications. We have to prioritize the use cases based on the impact, feasibility, and alignment with business goals and needs. We need to conduct a feasibility study for each use case considering data availability and the technical constraints which are imposed. We have to evaluate the most important aspect, that is return on investment. We need to select a manageable number of high priority use cases to focus initially. This is a very important aspect, so we should remember. Next comes the stakeholder involvement. We have to get stakeholders properly engaged in this process. We need to use their skills and their understanding also to gather the requirements and ensure alignment. We have to identify all the stakeholders, including the business leaders, the technical teams, end users, and we have to conduct interviews and meetings to gather input and requirements from the stakeholders. We have to establish clear roles and responsibilities for each stakeholder in the group. We should ensure the continuous communication and updates to keep stakeholders engaged and informed. We have to also address the concerns and the expectations to ensure that the stakeholder buy-in and support. Most important step comes now, that is the data collection plan. We have to develop a plan for collecting and managing the data required for your GenAI or AI model. We need to identify the types of data required for the project and potential sources. We need to develop a proper data collection strategy, including the methods and tools for data acquisition. We need to establish a proper data governance policies towards ensuring the quality of the data and integrity of the data. We should also plan for the data storage, management, and access. You should consider the scalability and security without fail. We need to set timelines appropriately and milestones for the data collection activities without fail. Next comes the data preparation. This is a very important stage where we have got data acquisition coming first, where we gather data from relevant resources, ensuring it's comprehensive and it is representing the large volume that we are looking at. This is a very important point and we should understand this. And next comes the very important aspect of ensuring how the data collected is going to be compatible with the analysis and the modeling tools that we are having in hand. We need to verify the data sources reliability and we need to ensure that it's accurate as well. We have to document the data collection process for future reference, and that's a very important point. We have to address any legal and compliance requirements for data acquisition too. And the data cleansing comes next. We have to identify duplicate records to prevent redundancy. We should handle the missing values appropriately. We can go ahead with imputation or exclusion techniques to handle this. We have to correct errors and inconsistencies in the data. We have to standardize the data formats and units of measurement across datasets. We have to validate the data quality by EDA kind of techniques. And next follows the data labeling techniques. label the data if necessary for supervised learning tasks. And we need to utilize the available automated tools if it is feasible for you, or if it is not feasible, go ahead with manual labeling. We need to also ensure inter-annotator agreement if multiple people are involved in labeling. This will ensure that we go with the standard way of labeling it. We need to also create feedback loop which can help in refining the label and improve the accuracy over time. And finally comes the data augmentation. We have to apply techniques such as the rotation, flipping, and scaling to augment the image data. Using the text augmentation methods, which can include synonyms and replacement, and paraphrasing for NLP tasks, would really help. Generating synthetic data where real data is scarce or imbalanced is a great approach to follow, and that's a way to go about it. We can combine multiple data sources to enhance diversity and richness of the dataset too. These are all simple ways that you can go ahead with data augmentation. Next comes the model development. Model development starts with algorithm selection. We need to assess the nature of the problem, and then we can select suitable algorithm. For example, regression, classification, clustering, whatever. Considering the complexity and the interoperability of the different algorithms always helps. You have to evaluate algorithms based on the performance metrics relevant to the problem. We have to test and select the proper algorithm for your application, and you need to also stay up to date on the latest advancements with respect to the research that's happening in the sector of GenAI and stuff. And the most important aspect comes now, which is model training. We have to split the data into training, validation, and sets to ensure a very robust evaluation. We can use cross-validation techniques to understand and ensure that there is no overfitting or underfitting. You may have to go with tuning the hyperparameters as well, which is very important, and that will help you in getting the model trained properly. We can implement mechanisms for saving and versioning model checkpoints during the training. That will also help. Then comes the model evaluation. We have to evaluate the model using appropriate metrics, which can be accuracy, precision, recall, F1 score. We have to conduct thorough testing on the validation and test sets to assess the model performance. You have to perform error analysis to understand the model strength and weakness, which will help you in improving the model. And comes the iterative improvement. Incorporating the feedback from the evaluation and the testing phases, which will definitely help you in refining the model, is very important. You have to experiment with different feature engineering techniques to improve the model input. You may have to adjust even the architecture and the parameters based on the insights that you collect from the performance metrics. Continuously, you have to integrate the new data to retain and to update the model. You need to also document all what you are learning. That's most important. Then comes the deployment and integration. You need to have a proper deployment strategy. You need to develop a strategy for deploying the GenAI model into the production environment. You need to understand where are you going to deploy it. Are you going to make it on-premises or edge on the cloud? You need to develop a deployment pipeline to automate the process from model development to production. You have to implement strategies for version control as well. And most importantly, the way you deploy should ensure that there is a scalability aspect connected to it. Disaster recovery should not be forgotten. Next comes the integration. Integration is very important step where you are going to integrate the GenAI or the AI model with existing systems through proper API or direct embedding. You should ensure the compatibility, and collaborating with the IT and the development teams will help you in streamlining this process and conduct a thorough check once you go ahead with this process. Then comes testing. You need a thorough testing to ensure the model performs well in the production environment. You need to perform end-to-end testing to ensure the entire workflow to see if things go as intended. Conducting stress testing also helps. You need to have heavy workloads, and heavy workloads should be handled by your model, and that says that your model is okay. You should also go ahead with user acceptance testing to gather feedback from the end users. All this will help you in getting your deployment very nice and smooth and error-free. Monitoring is the final stage in the deployment and integration. Set up a real-time monitoring to track the model performance as well as the resource usage. The logging and alerting systems are very important and you cannot avoid, and that will help you in detecting anomalies. Well, let's get into the maintenance and update. We have to go ahead with the performance monitoring, and we need to continuously monitor the model's performance in the production environment. You should know what is your key performance indicators and assess the model effectively with that. precision, recall, accuracy, all this can help you as a metrics in understanding that. Then comes the regular updates. Updating the model periodically to incorporate the new data and to improve accuracy is paramount. You should schedule regular intervals for the model retraining with new data. Then comes the error handling. Implementing mechanisms for handling errors and unexpected behaviors is very, very important, and that will make the model very robust. You need to create fallback procedures, and at times you may have to go with manual overrides in case of critical failures. And comes next the user feedback. Collecting feedback from the users to identify areas of improvement is very, very important. Collect feedbacks through surveys, interviews, or feedback forms, and that will help you in getting your model tuned much better for future. Compliance and ethics is the paramount of all the discussions that we have made. You need to ensure that the AI or the GenAI product, whatever you are building, adheres to the ethical guidelines and principles. You need to have data privacy considered and maintain very strict data privacy and security protocols to protect the sensitive information that you are collecting. Bias mitigation should not be forgotten, and you need to implement the measures to detect and mitigate bias. And finally, go ahead and compliance with regulatory authorities are also to be monitored and maintained. Standards and regulations are there already in place. Obey that, follow that. That will help you in building things proper. And comes the documentation. You need to go with comprehensive documentation. You need to maintain thorough documentation for the entire workflow, including the data sources, model parameters, decision-making process, everything. Knowledge sharing is again important. You need to share knowledge and insights gained from the project with relevant teams and stakeholders. And training cannot be ignored. You need to provide training to users and stakeholders on how to effectively use and interact with AI and GenAI system. That way, you get the complete workflow done, and I hope it was useful. In case you have any questions, go ahead and ask in the chat. I'll be able to answer that. Thank you very much for following my channel content. If you have any questions, please type it in the chat. I'll respond there. Thank you.